On February 28, the world watched as tensions exploded in the Middle East. The United States and Israel launched major airstrikes against Iran. This action followed weeks of rising threats and warnings from both sides. The strikes targeted Iranian military sites and infrastructure. The attacks happened late at night, catching many by surprise. Sirens sounded in several Iranian cities. Videos on social media showed flashes in the sky and loud explosions. People rushed into shelters, worried about what would come next. These strikes marked a sharp shift. An already tense region was now on the edge of broader conflict. Many feared Iran would respond quickly, and the world waited to see what would happen next. Iran wasted no time in answering the attacks. Within hours, it launched its own missiles and drones. But this time, Iran did not only target Israel. Instead, it sent missiles and drones towards several countries across the Gulf. This was not just a local fight anymore. Iran's response meant that the conflict was now crossing borders. Many countries that were not directly involved in the first attacks were now facing danger. The scale and speed of the response shocked many observers. Iran's move signaled a new level of risk. The attacks put the whole region on alert. Even countries trying to stay neutral were now being drawn into the crisis. When Iran launched its counterattack, the missiles and drones flew toward many places. Israel was the main target, but other nations were hit as well. Saudi Arabia, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Kuwait all reported explosions. Iraq and Jordan were also affected. Some missiles landed in open areas, while others hit buildings and military sites. Each country responded differently, but all were on high alert. Airports and military bases were at the top of their watch lists. The conflict now involved nearly every key country in the Gulf region. It was no longer just between Iran and Israel or the United States. This escalation worried leaders around the world. The recent wave of missile and drone attacks left a trail of destruction across several key locations in the Middle East. In many neighborhoods, buildings were reduced to rubble, their facades torn apart by powerful explosions. Streets that were once bustling with daily life now stood eerily silent, littered with debris and shattered glass. The aftermath of these strikes was visible everywhere, with emergency crews working tirelessly to clear the wreckage and search for survivors. One of the most significant incidents occurred in Bahrain, where a United States military site suffered a direct and devastating hit. The base, which is a crucial hub for American operations in the region, was left scarred by the attack, with smoke billowing from damaged structures and vehicles. Emergency response teams rushed to the scene, battling intense fires that threatened to spread further. Reports soon emerged of injured military personnel, some of whom required immediate medical attention. The chaos underscored the vulnerability of even the most fortified locations. The attack sent a clear message. U.S. forces stationed in the region are not immune to danger. Soldiers were seen taking cover and preparing for the possibility of additional strikes, highlighting the ongoing risks they face. The violence was not limited to military targets. Dubai, a vibrant metropolis known for its luxury and commerce, was also caught in the crossfire. The city's iconic skyline was briefly illuminated by the flash of an explosion, sending shockwaves through the population. At Dubai International Airport, a missile detonated nearby, shattering windows and sending travelers and staff into a state of panic. People scrambled for safety, unsure if more attacks were imminent. The chaos at the airport forced several flights to turn back mid-air or divert to other destinations. Passengers faced long delays and uncertainty as airlines struggled to adjust to the rapidly changing situation. Across multiple cities, the sound of sirens filled the night air. Military vehicles raced through deserted streets, responding to emergencies and reinforcing key locations. The presence of armed forces was a stark reminder of the heightened state of alert. The attacks were widespread, targeting not only military bases but also vital oil facilities and communication centers. Several communication towers were damaged, disrupting phone and internet services for thousands of residents. In some neighborhoods, the impact was felt immediately as power and water services were briefly cut off. Residents found themselves in darkness, scrambling to collect water and essential supplies during the outages. The fear of further attacks gripped the population. Streets emptied as families chose to stay indoors, and businesses shuttered their doors. The sense of uncertainty and anxiety was palpable, as everyone waited to see what would happen next. The attacks had a big effect on travel and everyday life. Airports across the Gulf region went into emergency mode. Flights were delayed or canceled as airspace was closed to keep passengers safe. Thousands of people were stranded at airports in Dubai, Doha, and Manama. Families tried to contact loved ones, worried about their safety. Tourists and business travelers slept on floors, waiting for news. Some airlines diverted flights to safer cities outside the Gulf. Local transportation was also disrupted as roads were blocked by security forces. The sense of fear and confusion was everywhere. Schools and offices closed in some places. Even those far from the strikes felt the tension, as news spread quickly on social media and TV. One of the most important and strategic parts of this ongoing crisis is the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow stretch of water, just 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, serves as a vital artery for the global economy. It connects the Persian Gulf with the open waters of the Arabian Sea, making it a crucial passageway for international trade and energy supplies. Every day, massive oil tankers and cargo ships navigate these waters, carrying millions of barrels of crude oil and petroleum products from the Gulf states to markets around the world. The strait is so narrow that ships must follow carefully charted lanes, making navigation both challenging and risky, especially during times of heightened tension. In fact, about a fifth of the world's total oil supply, nearly 20 million barrels per day, passes through this single choke point. This makes the Strait of Hormuz not just important, but absolutely essential to the stability of global energy markets. Recently, Iran has threatened to block the strait as part of its response to international pressures and sanctions. The presence of Iranian Navy vessels and military patrols has increased dramatically, raising fears of a potential confrontation or accidental clash in these crowded waters. If Iran were to actually close the strait, even temporarily, it would have a devastating impact on the world's energy supply. Oil terminals would stand empty, tankers would be forced to halt at sea, and storage facilities would quickly fill up or run dry, depending on their location. The mere threat of closure has already sent shockwaves through financial markets. Oil prices jumped sharply as soon as the news broke, with traders and investors reacting to the possibility of a major disruption in supply. Shipping companies are now on high alert, worried about the safety of their vessels and crews. Recent attacks on oil tankers in the region have only heightened these concerns, forcing companies to reroute ships or delay departures until the situation stabilizes. As a result, some ships have turned away from the strait altogether, while others wait offshore for clearance or safer conditions before attempting the passage. This has led to a growing backlog of vessels idling at sea, further straining global supply chains. If the strait remains closed, or even partially blocked, the consequences could be severe. Fuel shortages and higher prices at the pump would quickly spread to countries far beyond the Middle East, affecting everyday life for millions of people. Many nations, from Asia to Europe and beyond, depend heavily on oil imports from this region. The impact of any disruption would ripple across continents, reminding us just how interconnected and vulnerable the world's energy system truly is. As the crisis unfolded, rumors spread quickly online and on TV. Some reports said Iran's supreme leader might have been hurt or even killed in the attacks. However, no official source confirmed this information. The Iranian government called these stories false. Still, many people were left wondering who was really in charge. If Iran's leader was hurt, it could make the situation even more unstable. Other leaders in the region also remained quiet, adding to the uncertainty. This confusion made it hard to know what would happen next. Journalists and diplomats kept searching for facts, but answers were slow to come. The world watched with bated breath as the crisis rapidly escalated, dominating headlines and conversations everywhere. In airports, cafes, and city squares, people gathered around television screens, their faces tense with worry and anticipation. The sense of uncertainty was palpable, as breaking news updates interrupted daily routines and drew global attention to the unfolding events. Almost immediately, protests erupted in major cities around the world. In Tbilisi, Berlin, and across Australia, thousands took to the streets, waving banners and chanting slogans. Some called for peace and restraint, while others demanded justice or voiced anger at perceived injustices. The demonstrations reflected a wide range of emotions: fear, outrage, solidarity, and hope for a peaceful resolution. The protests were far from unified. In many places, crowds were split between those condemning the recent strikes and those expressing support for Iran's response. Heated debates broke out at rallies, with people holding conflicting signs and passionately arguing their perspectives. This division highlighted the complexity of the crisis and the deep-seated tensions it had reignited across different communities. In some cities, Iranian expatriates gathered in celebration, waving national flags and chanting patriotic slogans. For them, the events were a source of pride and a moment to express solidarity with their homeland. These celebrations stood in stark contrast to the anxiety and fear felt elsewhere, underscoring the diverse reactions to the crisis. Meanwhile, inside the region, the atmosphere was tense and uncertain. Many families chose to stay indoors, peering anxiously out their windows as streets emptied and businesses shuttered. In cities like Tehran and Baghdad, the usual bustle gave way to eerie silence, as people worried about the possibility of further attacks and the safety of their loved ones. Governments around the world responded swiftly. Officials held urgent press conferences, calling for calm and urging citizens to remain vigilant. Security forces were placed on a high alert with military vehicles patrolling key locations and emergency plans activated. Behind the scenes, leaders weighed their options, preparing for the possibility of new strikes or further escalation. The United Nations convened an emergency session as world leaders took to podiums to call for restraint and dialogue. Their messages were clear. The world stood at a crossroads, and further violence could have catastrophic consequences. Diplomatic channels buzzed with activity as countries sought to de-escalate tensions and prevent the conflict from spiraling out of control. Ordinary people everywhere felt the speed and danger of the escalation. In cafes, on public transport, and at home, millions checked their phones for updates, their faces etched with concern. The uncertainty weighed heavily as families and businesses braced for what might come next. The economic impact was immediate. Oil prices surged on global markets, reflecting fears of supply disruptions. Airlines canceled flights and rerouted planes to avoid conflict zones, while businesses scrambled to assess risks and protect their interests. Boardrooms around the world buzzed with urgent meetings as leaders tried to anticipate the fallout and safeguard their operations. With each passing hour, the risk of the conflict spreading grew more real. News headlines warned of escalation and maps showed conflict zones expanding. Military convoys mobilized in several countries, signaling that the situation could deteriorate further if diplomatic efforts failed. In Iran, all eyes were on the country's leadership. High-level meetings took place behind closed doors as officials weighed their next moves. Reporters gathered outside government buildings, eager for any sign of a shift in strategy or a new announcement that could change the course of events. Another key question was the extent of the damage inflicted on military bases. Emergency crews worked around the clock to assess destruction, repair critical infrastructure, and ensure the safety of personnel. The scale of the damage would likely influence future decisions and the potential for further retaliation. The status of the Strait of Hormuz became a major concern. With shipping lanes blocked and oil tankers anchored offshore, global trade faced significant disruption. The reopening of this vital waterway would be crucial for stabilizing markets and restoring a sense of normalcy. Meanwhile, foreign military forces began to mobilize. NATO troops prepared for possible deployment, and international bases raised their alert levels. The involvement of additional countries could dramatically widen the conflict, making the stakes even higher for global security. As the world waits for the next developments, one thing is clear: the path forward is uncertain, and the stakes for global peace and security have never been higher. People everywhere hope for a peaceful resolution, but the coming hours and days will be critical in determining whether the crisis can be contained or if it will spiral into something far more dangerous.